Hey everybody, I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today, and this is a pretty special day for me. Um, I'm sitting here with Jimmy Bruno, and Jimmy a few months ago declared that he was retiring from like show business, the guitar world, jazz guitar, um, and I think that like a lot of us, knowing Jimmy, we thought, well, okay, this will last a month or two or three, but I think he's pretty serious about it this time, and I felt like let's honor Jimmy's career. And if he decides that hell freezes over like the Eagles did and they get back together again and get out and play, well then, God bless it. That'd be great. We would love to see that. I'm gonna um in a second I'm gonna pin you, Jimmy, so people aren't looking at me too much. I don't want to talk too much, but man, what a career you've had. I mean, I'm so honored that to be sitting here talking with and I'm just gonna say it like it is, one of the true greats of jazz guitar. You're one of the guys. I mean, when it's all said and done, your name is going to be spoken in the same lights as people like Wes, Joe, and people will remember that. I mean, I know when I was starting to phase out of blues and rock and pop and everything that I was doing and started getting interested in jazz, that you were the guy that I looked up to the most, and you were the guy that I said that's who I want to be. And I remember several NAMs ago, back when I was in the industry, going to the Fender booth and getting to see you play live and in person and in front of me from you know 3 feet away. And I'm going, geez, I've never said to anybody I want to cut my fingers off, but because that's not the way I roll. But I was so inspired to, work hard, keep working hard, man. And to just be inspired by what you did, musically, what you could do musically, the guitar, the tone, and everything. It was incredible. So my hat's off to you, my friend, and I want to talk about your long, illustrious career. So, you got any comments so far?
Well, it's nice to be uh, sort of in such a great company as those guys you mentioned, all my guitar heroes. Um, but I became friends with Johnny Smith a long, long time ago. I met him in Wrexham, Wales, where he was being honored there by Trevor Owen, and I asked him why he no longer played the guitar, and he had said something to me like, "Well, my fingers are a couple seconds behind my hands,
Hmm.
mind, or something like typical Johnny Smith. He had a very dry sense of humor.
Hmm.
And in fact, and another time I asked him, actually, he was being honored in New York City at the Danny Kaye Playhouse. There was these guitar concerts that were put together by Charles Carlini
Yeah,
via George Wein, I think.
right.
And he was there, and I met tons of guys in New York. Guys that like, for example, Joe Puma was there. Okay,
Mhm.
not an everyday name, but he was one of the greats as well. And he was he was very salty. His sense of humor was really salty. Okay, and so he says to Johnny Smith, he says, "What's this bullshit that you're not going to play anymore?" Okay. And Johnny Smith told him the same thing. He says, "Well, my mind is a few seconds behind my fingers." And Joe Puma said to him, "So start sooner." So, yeah. So, there comes a point where you gotta. Johnny Smith was like kind of like a perfectionist. and he didn't. He wanted to be remembered when he was playing at his best,
Right.
and it's time for me to put the guitar under the bed. I mean, I'll always play the guitar.
Of
I'll
course.
always play the guitar. I enjoy doing my YouTube channel. And I play tunes. I've been playing a lot of solo guitar lately. I'll always do that. I just will never play as good as I used to because I'm 71 years old.
Yeah.
So things change. My metabolism is not the same. You
Yeah.
know, um, I'll just never play as good as I did on those records that I made and all the concerts that I did. I just won't. And it's I don't want to be remembered that way. I don't want to be remembered as, oh boy, he really declined, you know. So that's why I don't want to play in front of audiences.
Right.
I just don't. It makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
Maybe it's all in my head, but I have to be happy first.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
and it's just I think it's time. I don't want to. I've seen so many um, guys that just stayed on the scene too long
Right.
and watched their playing deteriorate.
Right.
And I don't want it. I don't want that to happen to me. And that's basically, I tried to retire, but, during the pandemic. It was really good. It was a perfect time to, because nobody was working. Everything was closed up for like a couple of years, you know. And so, well,
Yeah.
retire from what? No place to play. And of course, my good friend Frank Vignola talks me into doing the Birdland, the guitar night on Wednesday nights,
Right.
And about halfway through it, I mean, it's really far for me to go to, and so then I had to start practicing again. And I said to tell him, I said, Frank, you could talk a hungry dog off a meat truck, you know? Like, geez, what did I commit to here? But I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it certainly is a really fine club to play in. I mean, it's the one of the jewels of New York City.
Right.
And it was really exciting to play there. And one of the drawbacks of it was when I would usually get home, we would finish about 10 o'clock. I could get back into the car at 10 o'clock and go home. By the time I got home, it's like 11:30 or midnight. I couldn't go to sleep
Yeah.
because I had that New York energy.
Yeah.
Uh, it really there's a magic in that city.
Oh yeah.
With all its problems and everything else, there's no place like it. So but it's just time. There's some things that I want. I mean, I'll always be interested in music. I've always been interested in Stravinsky's music, Debussy, Ravel,
Yeah.
Beethoven, Mozart. Okay, so when I moved to Las Vegas, I think my first job I was working for Lola Falana, and she asked me one time. She says, "Can you write arrangements? For the show band, in Vegas. So it was a big band with strings.
Right.
And I said yes, and I never did it before." And she says, "Well, come to my dressing room. We'll go over some tunes."
Right.
Okay, so I did, and I knew the tune. She says, "Yeah, see, write me a chart for this tune, that tune, that tune." Okay, so then okay, thanks, Lola. And I go home and I said, "What do I do now?" Okay, I called some friends. I says, "This is what I said." And he says, "Well, go get some books." And so I got the Henry Mancini has a book called Sounds and Scores, and there was a couple other ones. Okay, and the first round, I was surprised. I went like this in front of an orchestra, and I was really scared. I didn't know like this.
Right.
I didn't know what was going to come out. It was a crapshoot, and all of a sudden, wow! It made a sound. You know, but my notation, I didn't notate it efficiently.
Right.
You know, so I saw guys laughing. the trumpet section was laughing at me, and it's like, I was 21 years old, and it's like, what the F are you laughing at, And the trumpet player says, well, if you want a short note like bop, bop, he says, don't write a 16th note, write a quarter note, and you put a little carrot on the top.
Oh,
Okay. And so that went, I got so much use out of that information.
right.
And all of a sudden, my music became very easy to play
Wow.
because you put too many rests in there, somebody's going to make a mistake, you know? And I kind of gradually learned that, and it also helped me to be a better sight reader,
Right.
and everything I wrote got better and better and better, you know. I started to do whatever studio work was in Las Vegas, but I was doing studio work as an arranger, not as a guitar player.
Now that I did not know.
Yeah, I was doing all kind of. I wrote a whole string album for this girl who had a string group. Her name was Lynn Case. I haven't seen her in 30 years. I hope I hope she sees this.
No.
I've been trying to find her for a long time. And she turned me on to uh, Stravinsky, Petrushka,
Hmm.
because she started to play me some, Mozart, Beethoven, and stuff like that. And at the time, I didn't have the capacity to appreciate it. It was like what I had expected.
What was her instrument?
Violin. She was the lead violinist at the Sands Hotel.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. And so with that string section, she had an idea for me to write an entire album. The group was called Classical Smoke. And
Okay.
it was just strings, and sometimes we'd put some woodwinds in there and stuff like that. So I wrote this whole album, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the usual stuff, and I didn't have the capacity to appreciate Mozart and stuff because it sounded like, three chord things to me, you
Mhm.
know. And then later on, I can, he mostly wrote triads. A lot of all those guys, but how much music you could make out of triads? I mean, in different. I didn't, I couldn't grasp that then.
Yeah.
So she was a very smart lady. She says, "Well, I'm going to play something knock your socks off. I'm going to, make you go wow." And she played me Petrushka by Igor Stravinsky, and I went, "Holy shit, what is that?" And I went out and bought all the scores. Petrushka, then I went Petrushka, Firebird to Rite of Spring,
Right.
but all the scores, okay? And then from there, I heard Ravel, Debussy, string quartets, et cetera, and that's how I learned how to write, and I've always been interested in that. So, that's what I've been doing lately is I dug up all those old scores, and some of them I lost, so I bought them on Amazon, and
Hmm.
I'm studying that music once again. Like I'm set. That was 50 years ago, and I'm still as blown away by it as I was then. You know.
I want to show you something. Hang on one second. So our guy who does all of our written interviews, Joe Barth.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
know, Joe.
Yeah. And he did an interview with you a while back that's really in depth, a written interview. Well, it's we have it in writing. He transcribed. We have it in writing. It's going to go along with this video. And Joe was talking about how you had learned a lot of your music from the violinists that came to your parents' house.
Yes,
And
yeah.
a lot of the early music, that the way that you approached it was violins. You know,
I that's how I learned how to read music from
yeah,
violin books.
yeah.
Right.
And what's really interesting to me, and I'm not judging or putting anybody down or anything like that, but when someone comes and hears you play at Birdland and you're playing whatever song it is, the amount of knowledge that's in your head, because you've studied all this classical music, and I mean, I know you studied, you worked with um, Buddy Rich, you know, you've worked with, I mean, it's the resume that you have, and it's all in the article, and I want people to read the article as well. You've worked with, the finest musicians. You've done. I didn't realize that you had in LA that you were doing the arranging, but the amount of information, musical information that goes when you're playing a solo and there will never be another you. Now I can play that solo or a solo, and I'm going to probably play it like, the chords and, and all that kind of stuff. But the 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 bank, the reservoir of information that you're deciding what you're going to play is 100 times bigger than anything that I'm ever going to do. And I don't know that audiences really, really understand that. And but here's where I think they do understand. For some reason, people want to hear you play, and they might not realize why. And it's dawning on me the reason why is because it's what's coming out of you is not only from your heart and from your soul, but it's also so informed. It's like
Well, I was lucky. Both my parents were musicians. My father was a guitar player, and my mother was a singer.
right.
So I've been listening to jazz my whole life.
Yeah.
Uh, I didn't know who Jimi Hendrix was or Eric Clapton until I went to high school. Because the kids would find out that you played a guitar. Hey, play some Hendrix. Now, who's that? And they
Well,
looked at me. I had three heads.
truth be known, he didn't even come out until you were in high school. So Hendrix hit the scene around.
70s?
No, it was in the late '60s
Okay.
because I was in high school when it came out,
Right.
and I'm a little older than you, and I remember taking Are You Experienced? So we had a music appreciation class, the classical guy.
Right.
And on Wednesdays, or no, we had music class, but on Wednesdays we could bring in our own music because he would play Mozart and he'd play all that
Right.
stuff for us. We could bring in our own music. So I had just gotten Are You Experienced? And I
Right.
ran home because I only lived 2 blocks from the school. I ran home, got the record,
Yeah.
and we put it on the stereo because he's feeling very proud that he's letting me listen to my music.
Right.
And Purple Haze starts. Bah, 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 bah. he, he came. I've never seen it. It was like a house on fire. He came out of his office so fast into the listening room and said, "What is that?" I mean, he absolutely, absolutely lost his mind over that, and he couldn't get it off of the record. His name is Walter Wrights in Amherst, New York. I went to Amherst High School. He couldn't get it off of the
Couldn't get it
stereo
off fast
fast
enough.
enough. There was a girl there, I think her name was Sally Hamlin, that was in my class. It would be the only person I know that would have actually witnessed that.
Right.
That,
Yeah.
but anyway, that was Hendrix. Um, you played with Buddy Rich. Did you happen to know Joe Azzarello? Was he around when you were playing with Buddy Rich?
No.
And you said that Buddy, you talk about your experience of the audition, and that Buddy Rich was really throwing sticks at people and
Yeah. Yeah.
all kinds of shit, and you were going to go home.
Right.
And then the guy said, well, said to Rich, so listen to this Bruno kid that, so forth and so on, and then you were told to be on the bus at 9 o'clock. I mean, that had to be a crazy
Yeah.
thing.
It was. I didn't want to go on the. It was a whole bunch of us lined up against the wall with guitars and a cord. You went in, you plugged into an amp, and he was rehearsal. He was rehearsing the band.
Right.
And I saw him throw sticks one guy, and get off the you stink. I mean, we wasn't a very subtle person. know? So I said to my father, I says, Dad, let's go home. I'm not getting up there. Okay. And
Right.
we're walking out. The road manager says, where are you going? And I explained to him, I says, no. He says, well, you came highly recommended. Okay. Took me years to find out who recommended me.
Right.
So, a saxophone player was friends with my father named Vince Trombetta. Buddy
Right.
Rich had done the Mike Douglas show, which was a local
Yeah.
Philadelphia. And this guy, Vince Trombetta, he was the saxophone player on the show, and he did a lot of writing on this really fine musician. And Buddy had asked the band, "Do you know any young guitar players might want to come on the road?" And that's where he got my name.
Right.
So that's how I got the job.
So yeah, yeah. I mean, of all the gigs that you played, different people that you work with, can you list maybe three or four that you remember fondly, standouts and things like that?
Well, I have to put Buddy Rich in there
Yeah.
because I learned a lot from. I learned so much from him. I mean, at the time, it was like, boy, I'm working for a maniac. But he wasn't. He was a perfectionist.
Right.
He really was, and he just had an innate ability to hear a big band, and those charts were very complex.
Oh yeah.
He'd hear it one time, and he could remember it.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody will ever play the drums that good ever again.
I don't think so. I don't think it's humanly possible. He's just
No, and so there was, and being around all these other guys, they were much older than, well, not a whole lot older than me, but they were all fine musicians.
right.
They really were. Um, I have so much respect for those, for those guys that were on the band. Especially like the lead trumpet players. Man,
Uh-huh.
those guys, what a hard job they have. You know,
Yeah.
uh, have buddy up your ass every night. You know, I mean, the lead trumpet player book starts with C above the staff, and they do it. The shows are like and 2 sets. I mean, I don't know how every night. I
And
mean,
that speed. That's the speed.
yeah, I
One,
mean,
two, three, four. One, two, pop.
just don't know how they do it. And so I've always been a fan. There's one guy I keep mentioning. His name is Rick Baptist.
Yeah.
He probably you've heard him so many times play, or if
Right.
you go to the movies, if you watch TV,
Right.
all fine. And he never made a mistake. I know this guy. I worked with him on and off for like 8 years. He
Right.
never once made a mistake.
Johnny Smith.
Yeah.
I want you to, in your own words, to say, what is it about Johnny Smith that just,
Well, he took the guitar to a new level. I think, he didn't consider himself a jazz player, which I found very odd.
uh-huh.
He didn't enjoy recording music either. He didn't like being in the studio.
Right.
Um, it was just that he played so clean.
Yeah.
These 3 octave runs, maybe I was attracted to it because it reminded me of, a violinist playing a concerto.
Yeah.
Pure perfection. I mean, he didn't memorize these things. And before he got known as Johnny Smith, I believe he was in the NBC orchestra for NBC. I think he was a
Right.
studio musician,
Yep.
and he could sight read anything.
Yep.
You know, um, and it was great to like not only um, play for him, but
Right.
to hang out at his house one time in
Oh, wow.
Colorado.
Colorado. Yeah. Colorado Springs.
Yeah, and he loved he called martinis see-throughs. Okay, and it was a big thing to get
Right.
him to his house because he had a little bar in his house. Okay,
Yep.
he said to me, "Do you have $1?" And I says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you have to." He says, "Would you like a drink?" He says, "The first drink costs you $1." So I gave him $1. He said, "Sign it." And then he got a dart or something, put it through it, and threw it into the ceiling. And it had a cork ceiling. And I looked up there; it was covered with $1 bills. Okay, and so when it came time for the vermouth, he went over to a plant spray bottle that he had, and that had the vermouth in it. And he'd sprayed it in the air, and he'd got the glass and moved it around like this to catch the vermouth. Okay, and so I had a great time. He really became a good friend. We kept in touch all the way up until he passed away.
So, um, you played with Doc Severinsen.
Yeah, sure, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Well, he was like one of the guys in the band.
Yeah,
Of course, he was a star, and he was,
yeah,
very, very well financially and everything. But he was still the trumpet player in the section.
yeah,
He treated everybody just great.
yeah,
He really did. I just read that he recently retired. He's like in his late 90s.
yeah.
He stopped playing.
What a phenomenal, phenomenal,
Yeah.
phenomenal
And he
drummer.
was a nice, he was a genuine, nice person. There was a lot of nice people that I
Now,
played with.
was this during the Carson years or not?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but
Uh,
he had like Bob Bain and he had a bunch of he had guitar
and
players.
Bob Bain, and after Bob Bain was Peter Woodford.
Yeah.
And sometimes Peter Woodford would take off, and he had access to the NBC Learjet. So I did play on the Tonight Show a couple times because he said, Peter's taking off, and do you want to come and do the show? And I says, yeah, okay. I mean, what am I going to say no? And so the Hilton, no, the Sands Hotel, it didn't have a heliport. That was the Osmonds. That's a whole other thing.
We're gonna get there in a second.
Yeah. But so I mean, Vegas was really small then.
Yeah.
So I would meet him at the airport and get on
What years was that?
had to be 75, 76.
I, I remember seeing the Hilton Hotel was the biggest outdoor sign in the world at the time.
Yeah.
And Elvis Presley was there. Now
Right.
people have to understand that that thing looks like, I mean, it would be, you wouldn't even see it on any given street in America today because it was big, it was huge, but things
Had
have
the
gotten,
big, the stage was enormous.
things have gotten out of hand. So, BB King was in the lounge and Elvis was in the main room for
Right.
$15.
Wow.
They were, yeah, $15, and BB King was in the lounge for free.
Right.
So I went to see BB King
Yeah.
for free.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. I started at the Hilton. This was after Elvis.
How in the world, Donnie and Marie? I mean, it's a long way to go from Buddy Rich
The Donnie and the
to
Osmonds.
the Mormons,
Oh,
I mean, it's like,